9/11, a time and event that we all remember. Where were you during 9/11? A question that many of us might ask is, where was God? All that's coming up next on the DudeFax Podcast.
Welcome to the DudeFax Podcast. We're four guys, a church planner in the Pacific Northwest, an Army chaplain, an equity plan management analyst, and a connections pastor, whatever that is. In the past, we all served in youth ministry together. In the present, we create weekly podcast episodes dealing with ministry, church life, and pop culture. And in the future, well, we're going to be the cool granddad that tells his grandkids to pull his finger. If you love Jesus, Java, and corny jokes, you're going to fit right in. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy this week's episode of the DudeFax Podcast.
Well, welcome to the podcast. We are the DudeFax, and you that are listening are the amazing folks that we love to share laughs with and good, hearty biblical discussion with. So thanks for being here. We will see you next time. Thanks.
See ya.
I'm just kidding.
That's it.
We are here today.
Oh,
All drinking our Coke Zeros.
That sounded nice.
That's
Thanks
right.
to Josh. He this isn't sponsored by Coke Zero, but
It
maybe
should be.
yeah. Coke, if you want to sponsor us.
Yeah, should we all do our...
Yeah.
Or and
Coke.
Yeah.
some
Just
ASMR.
makes everything better. All right. We are glad you're here. We are going to have some serious discussion today. If you're listening to this when we upload it, it is 9/11, Patriot Day. And we obviously remember the tragic events of that day and the way that it shaped our nation and our world. But we also want to reflect on it spiritually and look at some things, some questions that may often occur or come out of thinking of horrific events like 9/11 and Pearl Harbor and other things that have happened in our world. And maybe ask the question, why would God allow these things to happen? What our response should be as his followers. And we're going to dig into that today and I think have some good discussion. But first, just want to see how you guys are doing. Are you guys doing all right? Excited that, hey, football is back?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it was that game last night was a really good game between the Lions and the Chiefs. And I do like the fact that Patrick Mahomes, as we saw earlier, has the most interceptions in the league right now.
Leading the league.
And he's leading the league in losses as well.
Yeah.
So
That's those hard-hitting statistics you only get early season.
it is, yeah. It's the worst he's ever looked.
And the Lions looked great.
They did.
I mean, this is the first time they had the best record in the NFL in like ever.
And with Jared Goff, I'm glad to see him finally on a team that, is doing so good. I mean, he came from the Rams, right? And like as soon as he left, they just went off.
Yeah.
And now he's at the Lions, who have always been terrible. Now they're undefeated. It must be him. It must be the golf factor.
No, it's a Cinderella story, really.
It is.
That's right.
Just coming in undefeated.
He's going to Disney World this year. Jared Goff. You heard it here first. DudeFax Podcast.
I should have asked him at the end of the game, like first game of the season. You won. Now what are you going to do?
You beat
Go
the
to Disney
defending
World.
champs. Man. So we got the NFL. We got college football going on.
It's the more exciting.
Yeah. So, I mean, between Notre Dame and the SEC, I think we all like some college football here. This is the time of year where you put all of your hopes and dreams and cares into a team that has no idea that you exist.
Mm-hmm.
And your whole livelihood really depends on if they win or not. So for the next 4 months, if you see smiles on our faces, it's because our teams are winning. If we're mad, it's because our teams suck.
Yeah. I mean, everything emotionally for me for the next 4 months is dependent on the performance of these 18 to 20-year-old guys in college football.
Yeah.
And then the majority of people in their 20s in professional. So I hope they don't suck and let me down.
Yeah.
I've luckily still got some MLB hope going into October, so
Oh yeah.
I might be happy for other reasons too.
Are you a Red Sox fan as well?
Rangers?
Oh,
yeah.
Rangers. Oh, are they doing
Rangers,
okay?
Yeah, they're doing good.
Rangers
this
are
year.
doing
Okay,
good.
I can pull for the Rangers.
So-
They're tearing it up.
First solid year in a while.
Yeah.
It's probably since getting kicked in the nads by St. Louis.
That was such an amazing World Series.
That was
Although
fun.
I was rooting for the Rangers. Man, what a World Series that was,
Mhm.
though. That was one of the most epic, I think, World Series
hmm
in modern time.
Yeah, that. And was it that Game 6 where St. Louis was down so many runs or something in the ninth?
Yeah, and they were like 1 out away or something.
Yeah, multiple times.
Yeah.
And it went into extra innings, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that was
I was up late watching that game and went into 1 in the morning.
Yeah,
I was watching that.
same.
Game. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah,
It's
a lot of
crushing,
a lot of crushing blows for all you Ranger fans
Oh,
out
yeah.
there. But other than football and baseball, there's some interesting things going on in our world. So one of the things that we do is we actually share funny things that we see, memes, all that good stuff with each other all week. And we've been texting each other this week, and we actually swapped some news stories as we were texting this week. And I thought it would be interesting to discuss some of them on the podcast today. So let's talk about this news story, and maybe you've heard of it, but this is awesome, hilarious. There's a man in Nebraska who was stopped by police for having a bull in his car.
Yeah, so
Riding around with a bull.
Yeah, so the bull's name is Howdy Doody, and police got a call that which is a great name.
There was probably a lot of duty.
Yeah, there probably was. It really reminds me for some reason of Back to the Future when they go to the future, which was like this year or last year or something.
2015.
And, has it been that long?
Yeah.
Oh man,
We're already like 8 years away from
jeez. But the big dump truck full of manure gets dumped into Biff's convertible.
Yeah.
I was just picturing that with this story. So the police get a call that a guy was driving down the highway in his car with some sort of animal, and or actually the report said it was about a cow in a car, and that they thought it would be like a calf, something small or something that would actually fit inside a vehicle. And the news story says it wasn't until officers saw it in person that they realized how large it was, and actually have the video here.
Yes. Video evidence
Of what this looks.
Yeah.
Just massive.
Look at that. I mean, he's retrofit his car.
Yeah.
That doesn't even look real.
Cattle gate on the side.
Yeah. I mean, but here's the deal. How many times has he done this? And this is because look,
Yep,
he's cut
howdy
out the
doody.
window. Oh,
That's some duty.
there's the duty.
That is a lot of bull crap.
Oh my gosh.
So
Those are so big.
I'm surprised this wasn't Texas, though. I think that's what I texted you guys. Like, does it back it? That's an old police car that says lice on it. That's what.
It's probably what it's filled with.
Look at that. He has an old police car. Oh,
I
man.
would say that's Texas, but I think Texas, most people would have a truck, so it'd be in just like the back of a truck.
Yeah.
That looks more like Oklahoma to me. I'm gonna.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if you have you guys been to Nebraska before?
No.
No.
I can honestly say that is probably the most boring state I've ever spent time in. Just driving through like rural Nebraska, there is nothing. So I applaud this guy because he's probably bringing some excitement to a state that has nothing but corn and terrible college football.
Yeah. I hope they let this guy continue doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's bringing joy to the masses.
Yep.
And think about that bull. That bull's going to slaughter, probably having the time of his life on the last day of his life.
Got the wind in his hair.
Yeah.
Just enjoying life.
I would not want to be the car that's behind him.
No.
Because that would be bad.
I've been the car behind plenty of livestock trucks hauling cows. It stinks. It's really bad.
Yeah, and the difference here is none of that's contained.
Yeah.
And it was all down the back of that guy's car.
Just flying off.
Oh,
the
man.
windshield behind you.
Yeah.
It's one of those days you hope you have plenty of washer fluid left
Yeah.
for your windshield.
That's right. Could you imagine him going through a car wash with that? Just going to get a whole
My
scrub
bull's
down.
dirty.
Well, there's another story out of the state of Florida. So you guys always hear about these Florida man stories, right?
Yeah.
Florida man did such and such. Well, this is a Florida bear. In fact, a 3-legged bear who had a name, by the way. I guess residents have named this bear Tripod, so they have a sense of humor. But this 3-legged bear broke into a house and broke into the refrigerator of this residence and actually took 3 White Claws out of the fridge and drank them and left while a 13-year-old boy was home watching this whole debacle happen.
I was going to say, was he watching it, or was he just like upstairs playing video games?
Was he having a White Claw with a bear?
There actually, I think, is surveillance footage. I should have had that up. But he did say that the bear's favorite flavor was the mango. So apparently the bear had a favorite.
Well, he's got good
It's
taste.
very
then.
discerning.
Yeah. But could you imagine a bear getting into somebody's fridge and consuming a lot of alcohol and then being like intoxicated and just roaming a neighborhood?
That's crazy.
That's almost the movie that came out.
Yeah.
Called Cocaine
Yep, now
Bear.
you got
Cocaine
White
Bear.
Claw bear.
All right, here we go.
Oh, you got the video. Here we go.
Wait. Give me a sec.
Yes.
Give me a sec. Let me get the
Coming through with the
screen
video.
share here.
There's this White Claw bear just likes to hang out on boats and like the lake.
Yeah.
He's just
White Claw bear belongs in
Getting
North
sunburned.
Florida. Cocaine bear, South Florida.
yeah.
All right, so here's a news story. Let's see.
Yeah.
Let me get.
Oh, that's a dog.
There we go.
Myers. Oh,
so
there,
there's the bear.
there's the boy.
kid. All right, let me.
He's watching TV.
Yeah.
There's the bear getting into the fridge.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to see. So I guess the kid's recording.
There it is. Yep. He got into the White Claws.
What's it called when you just like bite it? Is it shotgunning?
Yeah, that's when you like poke a hole in the
Poke a
bottom
hole.
of the
That's what he did because he didn't pop the
can.
top. So
Yep. Oh, look. Now,
There
now
it is.
oh, yeah. 3-legged bear.
woo!
Well,
I
he's a
mean-
known bear.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hey, that 3-legged bear that wanders around.
Yeah.
Look at her.
That lady's mad because her White Claws are gone.
She
They
has
have
a
beer
tap.
in their house.
Yes.
They probably drink too much.
I mean, it's probably
Yeah.
hard enough to. It's probably hard enough to walk steady after you've had a lot to drink.
Yeah.
But if you got one less appendage than you're supposed to have,
That bear knew exactly where to go.
That's
So,
right. he's probably
Yeah.
been there for parties.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that is the first one.
Well, this news story, I think, takes the cake. This was one that Ryan shared with us earlier this week, and you've probably heard about this. The diarrhea on Delta. A Delta flight going from Atlanta to Barcelona, Spain, was turned around in the air after 2 hours because a passenger had uncontrollable diarrhea, like all over the place. And I think the pilot actually got on and called like air traffic control and said, "We have a biohazard situation on the plane." Could you guys imagine this?
That's what you get for eating airport food before you hop on a flight.
Was there a Taco Bell in that airport?
Probably.
Hey, there is some footage here as well. If
Oh,
you want to see.
Wow, if you're not listening on YouTube, you are missing out.
All
I'll tell
right,
ya.
so this is actually somebody with their camera phone, and it shows the
Oh man.
flight attendants trying to, after they got off the plane, trying to. You see, they've got it covered
Oh,
in the walkway
that
there.
screams Taco Bell.
Oh, there's sustain. Oh,
Oh, yeah.
dang.
Should have warned. Should have warned our audience about this.
So-
Is she wiping it with her feet?
Yeah,
What?
she got heels on too.
That is not going to help.
There's less point of contact when you're wearing shoes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Gosh.
Oh man.
Look at that.
When I read the story, I think they talked about like the first person that noticed it was a passenger that like basically like noticed it on the floor, like maybe like on like the side of their seat or something like that. And my thought was a person did they just have, watery diarrhea and just or walking down the aisle of the plane and it was just like trailing along behind them? Because that's
Yeah,
awful.
I have so many questions because one, was the person not wearing pants? I mean, were they wearing like shorts and then were they going commando?
Yeah.
Or a skirt
More than likely
or something? Or was it so bad that it just like destroyed right through
More
whatever
explosive.
their undergarments
It was
were.
acidic. It just ate.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the things I ponder in my mind.
Late at night, so I'm trying to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you feel sorry for the guy. I think you may
Or
have
girl.
or a
I
girl.
don't know.
Well,
Do we know?
I don't know. I just assumed it was a guy.
I never
So-
saw a culprit.
Well, the news story said that they did not release the name of the passenger,
Okay.
which is good because they released plenty
Yeah.
on the.
Enough has come out.
I
Yes.
think so they landed the plane back at Atlanta and then had to do like a 5-hour cleaning on the entire plane.
They replaced
Oh.
all the carpet, is what I saw. I'm like, just burn it. It's done.
Yeah.
That plane.
Send that plane to the junkyard.
That's right.
Imagine, because it's one thing if
Sell it
you're
to Spirit Airlines.
if you're flying from like Atlanta to Nashville for a conference or something, and I mean this happens, and you get turned around. I mean it's a nuisance. You're like, what the heck? Okay. But I mean, imagine the people going from Atlanta to Barcelona. You got to think people are taking vacation. They've been planning this for like a year. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to Europe. It's going to be amazing. And then this happens. I mean, what a bunch of crap.
Yeah. Yeah, it does stink. I mean,
Hopefully there's some people with a good sense of humor on that. Man,
But-
this stinks.
but if you think if it's beginning of like your Barcelona vacation, I mean, at least it's all uphill, from there. Like, I mean, it can't
Hopefully.
get any worse, right?
Yeah.
I mean, unless you were the one with diarrhea on the plane. But
Yeah.
it's going to take a
Mhm.
lot to top that on your vacation.
And if you're the one
It's
with
true.
diarrhea, there's definitely no getting worse from there. It's
No,
all
there's
up.
not. You've hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
Well, what's odd is there was also a news story that came out this week that an airplane, I think it was Air Canada, that the flight attendants made some passengers sit and vomit. That
I heard of that. Yeah.
was in the seats. And so this like 2 plane stories in 1 week.
Involving bodily fluids.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you not ever want to fly ever again.
No.
Because I mean, you're stuck on this tube, and there's diarrhea. I mean, I've smelled people like get beef jerky out on a plane, and it's like horrible. It stinks up the whole
Yeah.
plane. Could you imagine this?
Yeah.
Vomit,
That's-
diarrhea. Oh,
It just because they smell anyways, especially if you're close to the bathroom.
The diarrhea one, I believe they tried to cover it up with some like vanilla scented, like,
ooh.
air freshener or something like that. And everybody just said it smelled like
That's-
diarrhea and vanilla.
It's like putting Axe on a middle school boy at camp.
It's
Exactly.
almost a direct equivalent.
We know that smell.
That's probably how they
very
test it.
well.
They
Yeah.
just put crap on the floor and they spray their Axe on it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, it's good enough to market.
better.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, it's still there, but not as bad. Oh, okay. You got to tell people about this.
Just in case, we're hoping this sound plays this week because our sounds didn't work last week. But if you heard that sound, that was the sloth sound.
Mm,
So,
it's glorious.
yeah, we hope that you can enjoy that. But I also played it for middle school boys because I figured that's what they sound like too. So I don't think it's a coincidence that about an hour after this Delta story is released, Delta releases another story that they have brought on NFL legend Tom Brady
The GOAT.
as an advisor. I mean, an hour later, I mean, do you think it's related to the diarrhea?
They're like, we need help.
They immediately
Who do we call?
Tom Brady.
They've
You
got him
gotta
on
get
speed
us out
dial
of this
for
mess.
situations like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I told you when you shared that, like he put up with Belichick's crap for a long time. I mean, I think he can handle this.
Yeah.
And I just say that because I'm a Titans fan.
I just didn't think he ever wanted anything to do with the Browns, but
Yeah.
I guess he does.
Man, he was able to make a shiny turd out of Tampa. So
Yeah.
he can do it.
So many good jokes there. I mean, he doesn't have Giselle anymore. You might as well go help Delta clean up some crap. Well, it also got me thinking, where would the worst place...
Sorry, I was trying to play that. It's a perfect. It just keeps playing.
It choked a whole airline.
Yeah, right.
Where would be the worst place to have uncontrollable bowels? I mean, an airplane's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad. Well, Jeff and I, we were talking about this earlier, and you mentioned that this was on your list as well, but I'd have to say, like, when you're standing at the altar waiting on your bride to show up,
Oh gosh.
that would be a bad spot.
Yeah. Especially if it gets on her white dress.
Yeah.
It'd be even worse if like you were the bride as you're walking down the aisle.
You're like, what's that? Oh gosh, I keep hitting that. I'm sorry. You're like, what's covering all the flowers in the aisle? Those don't smell good.
Yep. That was not what the flower girl
No,
put down.
That's right.
Ugh. I think it'd be terrible, like to have uncontrollable bowels at like a theater, not like a movie theater though, but like a theater where there's play going on.
Yeah.
It'd be terrible.
Yeah, because the movie theater already sort of stinks sometimes because they use like that ammonia.
Like poop anyways in there.
Yeah.
And the floor's already sticky,
floor,
so
yeah.
it wouldn't.
But yeah, theater I think would be a bad place. I definitely think a restaurant. I mean, you're sitting down to a nice meal and somebody's just trailing through the restaurant, especially if it's like an all-you-can-eat.
Yeah.
You know, one of those deals, and you just walk through the line and leave some trails.
Even worse is if it's like a cook like coming out of the kitchen to run into the bathroom and it's just trailing behind.
And he just comes back, coming to say, all right, I'm good.
Yeah, I was thinking church too. I mean, wedding or a funeral. I mean, if you're, you know, when you're going up to pay respects to the deceased, and
it's not very respectful.
Yeah, that would be. That's not the way you want to memorialize somebody at all.
Have you ever, you know, you've spoken a lot at weddings and funerals, and you know, a lot of sermons and at chapels and everything. Have you ever had one of those moments where you're in the middle of a message or something, and you just feel like the key turn, and it's this need, and maybe as you're leading worship, Brian, maybe you've had it, and it's just whatever you ate earlier is hitting, and then you get through it, but it's very distracting. Have you had moments like that?
I don't know if I ever have. I mean, I've had some where I haven't felt good, but I can't remember having that issue. It seems like the place where I've had the most issues is when I'm out running.
Oh yeah.
And it's always like when I get like the furthest away from like my house or my vehicle that it hits me.
So the most inconvenient time.
I'll be like 3 miles out and there's nowhere to go, and all of a sudden it's like it's gonna happen right now. It's like I have no paper, no toilet, nothing. I've had that.
You get that with cycling. I think it's just the movement, you know.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I have had it while playing worship, but I'm a bass player, so you know I got extra vibrations, and I'm standing right next to the drum kit.
Boom,
so
boom,
just
boom,
every beat is just drilling it down. Yeah, I have to run off stage and immediately go to the bathroom.
Yes. There we go.
Oh man.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. I mean, Ryan, you've mentioned this on the podcast a couple of podcasts ago about using your phone in the bathroom. But yeah, have you ever had it so bad that you've had to run to the bathroom, you forgot your phone?
Yeah.
Oh, that is bad.
It's usually the worst time in the bathroom too.
Yeah, and you can't catch up on your TikToks or.
What do you do?
Usually, I just look at like the creases in my hand. And just, like, count.
Wow.
Never noticed that one.
Fingerprints are amazing.
Oh man. Yeah.
Some great news stories. I mean,
it was a great week for weird news stories.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. If you're ever bored, just look at the news.
I'll tell you. And if you just Google weird news stories, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, everywhere. Unfortunately, they don't get like enough play, you know, but there's crazy stuff that happens all the time.
I think maybe there's a conspiracy because we have all this weird stuff going on in our government from politicians, like, you know, just like zoning out in the middle of speeches. And, you know, our president is up and down, old guy. We got another guy trying to run for president. He was the former president. He's like arrested and dealing with all that. And we got all that going on, which is already crazy and weird enough. But now we have diarrhea, Delta, and bulls and cars and drunk bears.
Somehow.
Yeah. It's all the distraction.
Yeah.
You know,
big distraction.
The QAnon is they're like, all right, put a bull in that car. Let's see what happens. And then you got the Illuminati with, they're like, all right, put whatever causes diarrhea in that guy's drink.
Yeah.
I just like to imagine there's like competing like secret organizations like putting out misinformation,
Trying to
like,
outdo each other.
Yeah. It's like, oh, we gotta do something. We gotta top their
We
crazy.
gotta step up our game.
So a few months ago, we had the lady that was on the plane that thought she saw
Mhm.
like some like weird guy,
The
the
reptilian or something.
Oh,
and everybody was trying to figure out who this lady was. Well, turned out they found she's like from Dallas,
that makes
and
sense.
they actually got her identity. She's like some huge marketing guru or
Mhm.
something, and so they've interviewed her, and she's been able to tell her story. Do you think that they'll ever find the diarrhea person, and that this person will get to tell his or her story? And would you want to if that was you?
If there's a movie deal and they want to buy my story, I'll tell it.
Yeah.
But if not, I hope they can black my face out and do the voice.
What would the movie title be? It would be like Snakes on a Plane 2.
Yeah.
Diarrhea on the Delta.
Yeah.
Hot snakes on a plane.
Sounds like a good Lifetime movie. Well, we've had some interesting news going on. We have some interesting things that you guys say, our listeners. And so we want to check in on that now. Ryan, what kind of comments? Let's see if this will play.
Appropriate sound effect.
Love it.
High quality.
All right. So all of our comments this week came from Josh's our TikTok video of Josh's segment from last week about conspiracy theories.
That's the only reason we do it.
If you don't recall, last week's conspiracy theory was about the houses in Maui being painted blue to like guard from this like targeted energy weapon that the government was testing on Maui, like which was starting the fires and everything. So we had well, I'll just start from the top here. So Ethan said Jeff knows he can't say anything to do with it being in the government, with the little side eye emoji.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about that.
So just feeding the
but he knows things.
feeding the conspiracy.
That's why he's eating cookies in the middle of this, so he doesn't say anything.
That's the first person they bring in when there's like some high, like top level conspiracy thing going on. They're like,
chaplain.
get the chaplain in here.
Yep. He knows.
And hey,
No, I responded to Ethan. And I said, listen, I work in the government. I know we're not smart enough to do anything like that.
that's what I'm always saying. I'm like, do you really think our
You
government
think they're pulling this
is
stuff off?
capable
Yeah.
of doing something that
Yeah,
low?
people are trying to get out of there and be home by 2:30.
Yeah,
No one's putting in the extra hours.
our government can barely afford to
No.
run the IRS. You think
Yeah.
that
They're too busy complaining about their medical.
And then let's see, we had some random people from TikTok that jumped on to give us some comments. We had G Reg 49er, I think is his name.
Ooh,
What's up, G?
49ers.
Said the utility company denies any claims that the fire started due to faulty electrical equipment or down power lines. That was the original claim. So, some interesting tidbits there, maybe just like feeding the credibility of the
Maybe we need to add a flat earth to our rating.
Ooh.
And then How You Doing said
How you doing?
I think we have that. Wait a minute.
It's on there.
Yeah.
So they said NATO blue ! The gov is out to get rid of we the people.
Oh,
So
All right.
And then we had a user random string of numbers. I'm not going to read all those.
I love those people.
Yeah, no.
Like you didn't even take the 3 seconds to change your username.
No,
Yeah.
couldn't be bothered.
Troll.
Too busy researching conspiracies.
Kind of a blank weapon, expletive. If it doesn't do blue, LOL, one of the most popular colors. And then Alpaca Soup responded to this person.
Ooh,
That sounds tasty.
Said, "What if I told you
that's why they got diarrhea.
they could adjust the wavelengths of the laser to affect whatever color they wanted?"
Ooh,
So
I did see a video now, again, TikTok, but of somebody was shooting a high energy laser at different colored like concrete blocks that have been painted different colors, and it would cause some sort of reaction on all the colors except blue. So maybe there's something there. I don't know.
Yep. Alpaca Soup's got it.
Yeah, I'm adding another half Earth, another half flat
it's
Earth.
the same reason they use like blue screen in Hollywood.
That's right.
Then you can't see it on camera.
That's right.
There may be something there. I don't know.
I'm not a scientist. I don't know.
I like the Alpaca Soup started that off with, "What if I told you?" Almost like they're like some investigative journalist.
Oh yeah.
So did he technically not tell
Big
us?
reveal.
Was this one of those?
That was hypothetical. Or like, what if I
okay.
told you that?
Oh, I
What would
gotcha.
your reaction be? I'm not actually telling you that.
Okay.
You gotta leave that plug.
Well, if it ends up being that the government's out to get we the people, I'm going to be really ticked at. Was it Alpaca Soup that said that?
Yeah.
Because he didn't really say. He just said, "What if I told you?"
Mm-hmm.
If it happens, and he knew it was going to happen, and he didn't really tell us, he's going to be held liable.
Yep.
Got blood on your hands, buddy.
They're coming for you, Alpaca Soup.
What if I told you Alpaca Soup fed that guy who was on the Delta plane?
He probably ate Alpaca Soup.
Yes.
Before getting some sloth soup, maybe.
Yeah. I imagine those were the noises he was making as he's walking down the aisle.
So long.
Oh man. I knew we would have fun with that.
Can we interject that sound and then like a trail of like farting sounds? Just make them to go together.
I wish that we could.
If anybody knows the Delta diarrhea dude or dudette, we would love to have them on the podcast.
Yeah.
So
would love to break that story.
Yeah.
Yep.
The interview, at least.
Well, we would be honored to.
They might just have to wear a diaper if they come to my house.
Yeah. I mean, you got nice carpet. We don't want to mess that up.
Yeah.
And I come up and take my shoes off. So I don't want to get my feet in your carpet.
That'd be bad. Don't need to be smelling that. But yeah, I mean, we won't make fun of them. We just want to know some details.
Yeah. And we can, with the technology we have, we can black their face out. Like I got a black notebook here.
That's true.
Can, like put over.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's like the classic deep throat interviews, right?
Oh yeah.
Sorry. Talking about Nixon and Watergate.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah. Like
you're lucky Grant's not here.
Yeah. He's kicking himself right now.
Oh yeah.
For not being on this.
So if you were expecting us to be talking sex this week, we are sorry, we're not.
We just wanted to see who all the perverts were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
who's upset? That's you.
So if you've gotten 30 plus minutes into this episode and you're like, when are they going to start talking about sex? No, in all seriousness, we did have to punt sex.
All right, marking that for a soundbite right there.
We did have to punt that discussion to another time because Grant, as you can hear or see, is not with us, and we wanted Grant to be a part of that because we feel like he has some good expertise.
Yeah.
You know, there are actually a few reasons, and one of the reasons, in all sincerity, was the fact that we realized, I think this week, that hey, 9/11 is this next week, and this is going to air on 9/11. So why don't we spend some time talking about that? So, as we've been talking about weird news stories, we're going to now transition into what was probably one of the most, just insane and mind-blowing headlines of our lifetimes. And when those planes hit the Twin Towers and all the events that occurred on 9/11 happened. So we're going to get into that, talk about our experiences, look back at that day, and also talk about the impact that it has on us as followers and our world, and what that means moving forward, and maybe even answer the question, why would God allow something like that to happen? So we will be getting into that next on the DudeFax podcast. Stick around because it's going to be a discussion.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to part 2 of this week's episode of DudeFax. We are discussing September 11th, because if you're listening to this on the day we release it, it is September 11th. And we are 22 years. This is the 22nd anniversary of the attacks in New York at the World Trade Center towers. And so we thought we would pause kind of in what we had planned to do this week. If you're just now joining us, we mentioned this on the first part of the podcast, that our plan was to kind of ask the question, what does the Bible say about sex and pornography? And things just didn't work out in our scheduling this week to have all of us together, and we really wanted that. So we're going to push that off maybe a week or so, depending on who's around. I know we've looked at each other's schedules. I think you may be out a week, and we'll figure it out. You don't need to know all those details. So Jeff had the idea of, since this is going to air on 9/11, we'll just talk about 9/11 and our experiences on that. We were in different positions in life and places going on. It's probably, Jeff, you said this in the first part, that it is probably the most significant event of our lifetime as far as a world event. And probably about it. I say at least, on a world stage, one of the most significant things, that's happened. So, and for us, it happened at a time when we were young, in those ages of trying to figure life out on our own in some ways. And so I think that had a unique impact on each of us. So we can just kind of jump into that. And then we're also going to talk about what questions that people might have when events like that happen, such as, where's God in all this? When we see something tragic happen along these lines, where there's so much destruction, so much death and chaos, like, where's God in the midst of that? Couldn't he have stopped it? And if so, why didn't he? And then how do we respond just as believers, especially if we get asked that question? I think understanding, how God works and his ways will be helpful for us. So let's just jump in there. And one of you guys want to start with kind of where you were when you first heard the news that planes had hit the towers?
Well, I can start with me, as I'm probably chronologically the youngest during that. So I was real young. So I was in the 5th grade when 9/11 happened. I feel like I was probably, around my age, or maybe like a year younger. Was probably like the youngest that like kids were that like were really felt the effects of 9/11. I feel like if you were any younger than I was, you probably didn't really understand what was going on. It wasn't as hard hitting for you, just because you didn't have the experience and world knowledge of the world yet to really put it in perspective. And for me, I know that the thing that hit me the most was that I was at school, so just going through a normal school day. They didn't tell us about it. My brother, who was several years older than me, he was in middle school at the time, and they actually were telling the kids, and they were watching the news and in class and stuff like that. But my age group, they didn't want to tell us because they didn't want to scare us and freak us out. So all the teachers just went on through the rest of the day acting like nothing had happened. And I get home off the school bus that day, and both my parents worked, so they didn't get home till later in the day. So let myself in. I'm coming in to watch some afternoon TV, do some stuff. I turn on the TV. I was trying to watch like Pokemon or something like that, and I was like, "What is going on? There's no Pokemon." So it was just these news stories, and I didn't know what was going on. All I saw was a smoking building. I was like, "Oh, something's on fire." I know what was happening, and my brother came in, and I was telling him, I was like, "Hey, the show I normally watch is on. I don't know what's going on," and he was like, "You don't know what happened?" And I was like, "No, what happened?" And then he was like, he told me that the World Trade Center in New York was attacked, and that we really didn't know much else what was going on. By that point, they knew that there had been an attack of some kind. I think that the Pentagon and all that had already happened by the time I found out about it, and I immediately just felt terrified as a child, and I didn't know what was going on. In my mind, I heard World Trade Center. I know there's a World Trade Center in Dallas, so I was like, oh my gosh, are they targeting more things? What's going on? So there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of just scariness, and the fact that my parents weren't home, I was had no idea what was happening, and it was a really really rough time for me. And then from there, growing up into middle school, high school, college, the I feel like I really saw the ripple effects of that event firsthand, and how it affected not only our nation and the people, but culture and future events and things like that. So it really was kind of a marker in my life for I don't know, I don't want to say like a loss of innocence, but more just like a kind of just an eye opener for me of the world, and kind of the that terrible things do happen, and that sometimes things are just not really explainable. um so that was kind of my approach from it, from young eyes, kind of growing into it. It was a crazy thing to see, witness, and grow up in.
Yeah, and you said it was a marker
Mhm.
in your life, Ryan, and I excuse me, I would say the same thing about my experience with it too. It was definitely a marker. It was the first time that I remembered actually feeling a little bit of regret, because I'd already gone to college and graduated, and my thought was, I'll never be in the military because
Mhm.
that window's already passed. And I remember thinking like, man, I wish I would have had the opportunity to serve, because a lot of my family had. And honestly, I think that was part of what God used ultimately to call me into chaplaincy. But that's a whole different testimony. But I remember that day. I was working at a bank. It was right before as several months before I went to seminary, and just going into the bank like I normally would on a Tuesday. We actually had some auditors at the bank that week from New York City who were there, doing their annual audits. And I remember walking in, and one of the auditors that I'd met was walking down the stairs as I was walking up the stairs, and she was in tears. And I just remember her kind of walking real fast past me, and I thought that's odd. Um, thought maybe something had happened in her family, and got a phone call. Didn't know what happened, and I walk into the lobby, and everyone who was already there were gathered around the small TVs that we had in the lobby. And by at that time, the first plane had hit, and I actually watched the broadcast as the second plane hit the towers. Um, I didn't understand it. And I think Josh and I talked a little bit about this beforehand. I didn't quite grasp the gravity of it, honestly, in those first few moments. I mean, it was scary, but it just didn't hit me like how many people work in that building, and even the surrounding area. But it's odd because 2 years prior to that, in '99, I actually had this really cool opportunity where I'd won a trip to go to the David Letterman show. And I got to bring somebody. So I brought my dad, and we flew up to New York City. And I'd been to New York before, but never really spent a lot of time in the city. But as a part of that trip, we took a tour around New York City, and we actually went to the World Trade Center. And I kid you not, I remember walking up to the World Trade Center, one of the buildings, and just standing next to it and looking. And I really had not seen buildings that tall ever in my life as a 20, 21-year-old. And I remember looking up and thinking, wow, what if this thing fell? I actually had that thought 2 years prior, like that, like this is so huge. It's massive. And then to see 2 years later, here it is, like worst nightmare, it's falling. And it wasn't until I got home that night to Stephanie and I had a little apartment, and we were talking about it, and she had obviously seen it throughout the day. And I think it was Stephanie that, her words sort of snapped me out of that mode of, not really, that feeling of this isn't a big deal. Cause she was like, this is a big deal. And she's like, look out how many people are missing or already pronounced dead. And I remember thinking, you're right. Yeah, this is, this is a huge, significant event. And obviously, as we found out everything that went in behind it, the gravity of it grew. But I sort of felt even that loss of innocence a little bit too. But at the same time, still to this day, I've never seen our nation more united coming out of that. That was the most united I'd ever seen our nation. I remember weeks later at the World Series, it was the Yankees and Diamondbacks, because I hate the Yankees, and obviously I'm rooting for the Diamondbacks wholeheartedly. But the World Series is in New York, and here is our president, George Bush, walking out when we're still scared at this point. We're still thinking like, hey, like, something could happen to our president. And here he is walking out into this very public place, thousands of people gathered for the World Series, and he's throwing out the first pitch.
Yeah.
And I got chills, like tears in my eyes watching that. I was like, that's incredible. But you felt this power. And I think one of the neat things, tying this in spiritually, is that I think God used that moment. And obviously we don't know all the reasons why it happened and God allowed it to happen, but I do believe he used that time to unite us in a way. And that uniting actually came through, I think, a loving response. Of course we were afraid, we were worried, but I felt like a lot of people had more of a loving response to those things. And you really saw it come to fruition in the way that our nation responded, much more than like, in recent years, 2020 with COVID, we had a very fearful response, and there was a lot of division during that time. There was a lot of unity during this time, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, I remember that when you're talking about President Bush throwing out that pitch, and the crowd went berserk, and chants of USA and all that. And it didn't matter what side of the political aisle you were on. There was this tragedy that united all of us. And man, it was unique because you were grieving, and you were still like, somebody did this to us, but there was such a unity that, like you said, that unite. It was so different, and we haven't experienced anything different. In fact, as you said, like with COVID, it's been the exact opposite. And but even before then, really, since I think, and I'm not saying Bush was the answer, either one of them, but it seems like after his presidency, it's just completely gone the opposite direction. When Obama was elected, and then on, there's been such hatred and vitriol for the other side. Yeah. So my story, that's a whole other topic.
By the way, before you
Go
get into
ahead.
your story, this will unite us. My son just brought pizza, and I feel like everybody should grab a slice.
Are we
here.
sharing this?
Yeah.
All right, I'll take a
Heck
slice.
yeah. I
All
think he
right,
brought it
thanks.
in here for all of us.
Oh man, Silas is a good kid.
So, yeah, grab you a slice there.
And he has not gotten the mullet yet, which is good to see.
No.
Yeah.
I just dropped pizza sauce on my shorts. So I was in my last semester in college at Middle Tennessee State, and I remember waking up, and my parents. I lived at home until I got married, And my parents were gone. My mom commuted to Nashville every day, so she was gone. My dad was at work, and I don't remember if they called me or if the TV was just left on. But we had this little box TV in our kitchen, and I remember watching the news story and thinking, what in the world's going on? Kind of like what you was. I was so confused, um, and I stared at it kind of in disbelief, trying to make sense of it. And I remember I was watching it when the second tower was hit, and that was a moment of, oh gosh, like this is something big, like, but still not thinking it was an attack, right? Like, because the news report for the first one was a plane flew into the Twin Towers,
Right.
and then it wasn't until that second one hit there was a little bit of what's happening, and then you have the third plane hit the Pentagon, and then the fourth one in a field. But at that point, I was like, I don't really get this. Didn't know the gravity, like you said, Jeff. And I had a class, so I went to campus, and I remember going into the music building, and that's where my people were. That's kind of like my tribe then. I spent a lot of time there, and the music building is always loud. Not just hearing instruments playing or if there's a band rehearsing, but just band people were loud people, and so there was always just stuff happening. It was a fun place to be, but it was quiet going in. I remember that. And then you would see maybe a few people over here crying or hugging or whatever, and then down the hall again or whatever. And it was just like the life that's usually in that building was gone. Um, and one of the band directors, I remember he stepped out of his office and said, "Hey, another plane hit something." And that really kind of, you begin thinking again, this is bigger, this is an issue. And I don't remember anything else that day. You said it was on a Tuesday, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was either that day or the next day. We had band rehearsal. I think Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So it'd been the next day, going out to the football stadium to practice, and because I was in the marching band, and going out there, and the guy who led the band, he was always this super fun, chill, laid back, easy to get along with guy, cutting jokes. And he was just at a loss. Like, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what's happening this weekend. I don't know what's happening next weekend. I just don't. So he's like, well, let's just play a few things. And he let us go. Like, it was just like everybody was at a loss of what to do. And I don't really remember the next few days of that. Bridget and I were getting ready to get married in just a couple months. And so I'm sure there was a lot of distraction with that. But whatever our next home game was, whenever that was, whether I doubt it was that Saturday, everything ended up kind of taking a pause for a bit, except for the World Series. Was that later on? Was that in October though?
It was later on, but I think things did pause
things
for a while.
paused.
I think games were
Yeah.
canceled, and
So it may have been that next weekend. During that week before whatever that home game was, we were practicing some sort of arrangement of Amazing Grace, and this team ensemble of bagpipe players came to rehearsal, and they were going to play with us. And I was getting chill. I mean, you just get chills with that. And then at that game, they played with us. It was pregame playing this, everybody in the stand. I mean, it was fuller than usual because people knew there was a special thing happening, and I guess, and first responders surrounded the field, and they had this huge American flag on the field. And the response to that after playing that with the bagpipes and everything, you saw people in the stands crying. And it was just, again, one of those moments during that they thought, man, this has impacted everybody. It's a huge thing, and it's still on YouTube. Like that performance is still there. I'll go back every now and then. I'll go back and watch it, and I just get chills thinking about it. But then I remember, kind of on the lighter side, that December, Bridget and I get married, and of course, everything changed. We talk about pre-COVID and post-COVID. I mean, there was pre 9/11 and post 9/11. And we were on our honeymoon. We got married on the 15th of December. and we're on a cruise, and I remember just security everywhere. And we got off at some port, and we were doing an excursion, and we looked really young. Bridget and I did, and we were trying to get back on the boat, and whoever was there, kind of keeping track of who's coming and going, didn't want to let us on unless our parents were with us. And like, we can't let you on. Oh, yeah, we see your passport, but where are your parents? I was like, well, we're married. We're not brother and sister. We're not from Alabama. And so they let us.
Tennessee is close.
It's close, but not as bad.
Also not children.
Listen, we'll marry our cousins in Tennessee, but
Yeah.
Alabama, it's siblings.
That's right.
And but it was a weird time. And I think about my kids. And my youngest was born 2 years after that, and the measures that are taken for security now is all they've ever known.
Mhm.
You know, I was like, hey, there used to be a time when all you needed was your driver's license, and they might pat you down at the airport. But you know,
People used to be able to drop you off and go all the way to the gate.
yeah, to the gate with you. That's right. That was
which
right
was
before
wild.
that. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely, man, definitely one of those moments in life that just changed everything.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about, we have a whole generation now that doesn't even know 9/11. Obviously they've heard
Mhm.
about it, but they didn't experience it like we did. And if anything, we now understand better, those who are older than us that experienced like Vietnam and the Great Depression and Pearl Harbor and things like that. But it's interesting to see this generation, that just sort of only knows post 9/11. And obviously it doesn't impact them in the same way. And in some ways it saddens me because that they didn't get to experience the unity like I talked about that did come out of
Yeah.
that, and to see that, hey, we can, despite political differences and beliefs, come together and be unified, over a common ground. We always talk about shared hardship is one of the things that unites, and we were going through a hardship together. Now, shared hardship can also divide, but this again was a uniting thing, I think, for the most part. And my kids obviously were born after 9/11 as well, but living in New York, we got to go to the 9/11 memorial, and we brought them to that a couple of times actually. And I think it gave both of them an appreciation for that moment, just getting to see some of those things. I was telling Josh beforehand that there's a room at the 9/11 memorial where you can actually hear answering machine messages from actual people who were in the building or on a plane who knew they were going to die, and they were calling their family and just giving them one last goodbye, loving message. And it was sad to see that. And even now thinking about it makes me sad, but also at the same time, there was just an outpouring of love from what was a horrific event. And so when I think about, that question, where was God? And I think, Josh, you mentioned it at the beginning of this discussion, that thought of, could God have stopped it? Sure, God could have actually, absolutely stopped it, but it was not within his plan to stop it. And obviously that's the question we have is, well, why was it not within his plan? But it makes me think, because obviously God's ways are much bigger than ours. I was just reading Isaiah 55:8 and 9 this week. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. What a reminder of the fact that he is God and we're not. And it makes me think, how many 9/11 type events has God stopped that we just don't know about? Because his ways are higher than our ways, because he is intervening all the time. And for whatever reason, he chose to let it happen on September 11th, 2001. But despite that, what man intends for evil, God can use for good, as we know from the story of Joseph. And God used that event, I think, for a lot of good. Now, arguably, we can say there's a lot of evil that still came from that. And there was a war that lasted 20 plus years that obviously had some issues and problems with it. But that spirit again, that unity, and I think that response and love,
Mm.
I think is something that our country needs, quite frankly. And I'm not wishing another
Yeah.
event like this on us, but it was, for lack of a better term, it was a revival. It was an
Mhm.
awakening for our country. Maybe not everyone turning back to God, but there were a lot of people turning back to God at that time.
I remember
And
like churches were packed
yeah,
at least the next few weeks. They were packed.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of those things where you see God redeeming a situation like that, because it gets your attention.
Yeah,
People start thinking about their own mortality, um, and questioning, what's going on, anything along those lines. And they were there. They were in church. People would talk about praying and thoughts and all of, whatever social media we had going at that point. And now it's like if you say, "Hey, thoughts and prayers," people are like, "You can keep your thoughts and prayers." It's just so different. But there was a sensitivity to spiritual things, a heightened sensitivity to spiritual things then. Um, and and when you look back on it, it's easier to see those things. When you're in the midst of a tragedy like that, it's really difficult to have just like this steady faith of, all right, well, God's doing something, he's allowing this for a reason. You're in the middle of it. You're like, God, what in the world? What? This is for children. I mean, there are children in the preschool there at the Twin Towers that were killed. And, um, but I think an important thing to understand is when it comes to God's will. You mentioned, it wasn't his plan. Like none of that's his plan. None of the evil was his plan. None of this chaos was a part of it. And so, like, it's not his will that anything like this happens. I mean, his will is that we all trust and follow him, and that no one perishes, and that we would live lives that fully honored him, which would mean terrorists not flying planes into buildings. And um, but things happen. He allows us people to make choices, but then the amazing thing is that he does take these things that were so tragic, and he pulls the good from that. Um,
I think it's
yeah,
easy
go ahead.
for people to get hung up on the, saying like, it's not in God's plan to stop that from
Mhm.
happening. God's plan is ultimately the redemption of
Mhm.
mankind. And things that happen within that, we live in a fallen world, and bad things happen, and that's just the reality of the state that, mankind is born into. And what God does do from that, though, is he's able to give a glimpse of his ability to redeem that in those tragic moments. He can bring those good things in the wake of those. So God's not a kid with a magnifying glass just picking and choosing what bad things happen and what don't. He's taking, the things that naturally happen in our fallen world, and he's taking that and like, hey, I'm still here. I'm here for you, and my plan is for you to be redeemed from this ultimately.
And you think if stuff like that, I don't want to over spiritualize this, but you think if stuff like that never happened, would we have, well, people don't really long for heaven anyways, but would we have a longing for stuff to be made right, for creation to be like, would we desire that as much? I mean, as we've gone through the pandemic and we're maybe on the other side, maybe it's starting up again. But the older I get and the more I deal with, the more I've dealt with the health issues that I've had, like, and then you throw the Rona on top of it, I find myself more and more like, I just want to go to heaven. Like, I just want this to be over, and not have to deal with this stuff anymore. I don't want to have, pain all the time or this or that. Like, and it does cause you to long for everything to be healed, not just
Mm-hmm.
physically, but within our world. And I'm glad you said that, Ryan, because that's so true. It having that perspective, like, all right, God's plan is to redeem this, to restore this, everything.
Mm.
Um, and the more we go through and experience tragedies like this, hopefully, the more it creates this longing to be with Jesus and for all this to be redeemed. And then maybe until that happens, maybe we're being motivated to do what we can to join him in his restorative work here. So things like that don't happen again, or so that when things like that do happen, we are active in being on the team, team God, and bringing, restorative work into the situation. Responding to love people well, and to serve them well in situations. So definitely, throwing out your thoughts and prayers, but can you go?
Right.
Can you be there? How can you best help? Whatever it is. And then again, you saw that after 9/11. I think you saw so much outpouring of love, intangible love, um, to the families that were affected, and so yeah, I mean, you saw God do that.
And we saw from that with 9/11 specifically, not that there weren't people that used the tragedy for their own purposes,
Oh yeah,
gain or whatnot, but I felt like on the majority, from top to bottom, people were united in getting through this, specifically as Americans. And you compare that to COVID, we didn't have that with something that was a big, not even national, but like just international worldly thing like COVID. We had people, you know, trying to misinform and use things for their own purposes, and causing that division. We didn't see that with 9/11, or at least not to that extent. And not to, and if that was done, it was able to be drowned out by the unity and people coming together in our government, from President Bush on down. I think that was the real difference there. And I'm glad you brought up that baseball game, because I feel like that moment in history was the moment. Everybody up until then, nobody knew what was going on. Everybody was kind of scared, like what's going to happen next. Everybody was waiting for the other shoe to drop, and that moment was our leader going out there on national television for a baseball game. Something that people were probably thinking, why are we doing this? There's so much more serious things going on. And him throwing out that first pitch, that was just signaling to our country that, hey, we're going to get through this. We're going to move on.
Yeah, there was perhaps nothing more.
Yeah.
Oh man, all the way. I pulled that clip up.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah, so let's see if we can watch this. Give me just a sec, because I'm going to need to adjust.
Yeah, and I want to get back to something we've all talked about, but Ryan brought it back up, is that idea of the way that we responded after 9/11 versus the way we responded with COVID. There was much more of a response of fear and division, and it's pretty neat. I actually read this book recently. It's called The One Truth by John Gordon. I don't normally plug books on here, but I bought it at the airport when I went to San Antonio. Read it. Great book. This guy he's not only a motivational speaker, but he's a strong believer, very solid in his faith, and incorporates that into the book. But the entire thing is about our perspective, and he's encouraging people to obviously be positive and optimistic, but really tying that in spiritually. God designed us to live joyful lives, and when we hit circumstances that are tragic or rough or terrible or whatever, we have a choice to allow those circumstances to dictate how we will then live. And so a lot of times, if they are negative, we're going to respond negatively, and possibly with fear, or anger or hate or whatever. Or we can allow God to work in our lives and respond in love, and also have a hope in Jesus, that confidence that God's got this, that that we have a home that is somewhere else, and we will one day leave this place, and He will heal this, and He's going to redeem us through Jesus. We can respond that way, and obviously you see no shortage of bad events happening in Scripture, but yet men like Paul, who's in prison, saying rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. And so I think it's a call back to how do we respond when tragedy happens? Well, we respond by choosing to walk in love, we respond by having that confidence in who God is, and that's what stands out.
Yeah.
Because people don't understand the guy who's been through hell, but yet he's smiling and has got cheer in his life, because that's Jesus in his life. That's Jesus at work. And so I think God uses those moments to sort of, almost engage that in his followers, and really turn people to see, like, wow, okay, this Jesus thing is real, because they have a confidence and a hope that I don't have, despite all that's happened. And he obviously did it in 9/11, and I think he did it with Corona as well, and still does it every day. But I think that's important for us as Christians, to not be the ones who freak out. And I think during Corona, there were too many Christians freaking out, and especially politically. And we got to be the ones that are confident in who our God is.
Yeah. Yeah. And to know that, you were talking on this, to know that it's through those events like that and times like that in our lives that, I mean, God does his best work, that's where we grow. That's where we're strengthened. And that's where other people see the effect that he has, in a life when tragedy happens.
I think it's interesting. One of my favorite books that I read in high school was Night by Elie Wiesel, who was, a Holocaust survivor, writing about his experience in that as a young person growing up during that, off of this horrific time in history that, this terrible thing's going on. And he talks a lot about, where is God in this? And he comes to ultimately a different conclusion than I did reading his work, that, he comes to more of a conclusion that that God turned a blind eye to the plight and the situation of the Holocaust and what was going on there. But I even at high school age, I disagreed with his deduction there, because my thought was more, I was like, well, you see God in the people that gave of themselves, sometimes their own lives, to help other people, and did, that's really God's work, is through the people that feel that conviction to help someone else, to give their own life or their own self, at their own detriment, to help other people, even in the worst of times that we have. I feel like that's really the image of God in those terrible things, is, how people respond. And I feel like that's important to understand as Christians. That needs to be our place when things happen. We need to be those people that are, like, I don't care what's going on with me. Let me help these people that really need it right now.
Yeah. And as we kind of begin to wrap this conversation up, they'll say, well, where's justice? These were good people. That's a whole other conversation, but this happened to good people. And, God's not ignorant of that feeling, of something terrible happening to a good person. And, you think of watching his son through his final hours of his life, the best person, Jesus, the good person, and the completely unjust way that he was beaten and mocked and tortured, if you will, and then murdered. God saw that, and he knew it was going to happen. And Jesus himself, as you're reading scriptures, he gets up to that moment of being arrested, and he's in the garden. He knows how bad it's going to be. He says, Lord, if there's any other way. I mean, Jesus didn't really want to feel that. He didn't want to feel the pain of that. He knew what it would be like. But he was willing to, because he knew the good. He knew what was going to come. For God was willing to allow that. He could have stopped it. Jesus could have stopped it, it says, right? The Bible says he could have just called 10,000 angels to come and take him off the cross. But our Heavenly Father, and then our Savior, through that moment, endured that evil and that those terrible events, because of the redemption that was coming. And like you said, Ryan, that's his purpose. And God is looking down on our life in this earth, and he's outside of time, and he sees it all from beginning to end as one as one event. I don't even know how to say that. Like, he just sees it all. Like, it's just laid out there, and he knows, okay, 9/11, COVID, blue houses in Maui, whatever. Like, he sees all that, and he knows where it's going. He's like, just trust me. Just trust me. I know where this goes. I know where this goes, even when we don't understand. Did you already share that verse? I may have missed it
Oh, out
about,
of Isaiah.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I missed it. Just talking about his ways being,
his ways are not
they're not our ways.
Yeah.
And we just have to depend on that truth and trust it. Anything else you guys wanted to add?
I was just going to say that this is just a good story, but 2 years ago, it was actually on my birthday, which at the end of September, we went to the city. It was actually all the chaplains at West Point went to the city, and we actually got to meet a couple of survivors that were in the towers, and they told their stories, which was pretty incredible. We also met this rabbi who was telling a story about he was at ground zero when all this happened, and they had evacuated some people to the subways, and he was walking down because he had heard that there was one of the subways nearby that had a bunch of people who were scared, frightened, and he said, "Well, I'm going to go over here and just care on love on these people." And so he made his way down the subway, and there's police standing there, and they stop him and they say, "Hey, hold up! Like, what are you doing here? Like, who gave you permission to be down here?" And he said, "God gave me permission to be down here." Now, obviously, theological differences with the rabbi, but I appreciated the story in that after he said that, the policeman laughed and just let him do his thing. There was such an openness, as we had already talked about, to God, and sometimes he uses events like that to sort of re-engage us and bring about that revival. But if we were only so bold with the gospel, with bringing God to people, I think at the end of the day, even with a world that seems to be running away from him, there are still people that desperately want that. And that was something that spoke to me out of that story was, may I bring God to people that fearlessly. And, even if it means, what's the worst that could have happened? They could have kicked him out. But even if it means I get yelled at or, whatever, scoffed at, may I be that bold. But man, it makes me long for a time in which our nation was just that open for God at the same time. So again, there's beauty in the chaos, and we have to be willing to see that, even though we don't understand how the inner workings of everything that God is doing.
Well, let's try to end with this clip. So
we need to go to America.
You guys, I tell you what, can pause mute yours and Ryan's mic during the video, okay? And just let mine roll so it picks up the audio from the.
Just want to.
Yeah, just pause it or mute it on that. Hopefully, you guys can hear me, right? Okay. So this is President Bush throwing out the first pitch at that Yankees World Series game. Okay, hold on. YouTube is muted.
First pitch. And please welcome the President of the United States.
And it was a strike.
you, Mr. President.
Yeah, that was. Oh, wait. There we go. Sorry for the echo. That was a pretty awesome thing to watch, especially live. Yeah.
I don't know if any other president would get a strike, especially now.
No.
Get Biden or Trump out there.
You got to get the short. You got to bring them up to the, like you bring kids up closer in games like that. Yeah, I mean, even the pitch was just right.
Yeah,
he threw that thing dead center.
Because that could have been very bad. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, we're 20 plus years removed from that. But if he goes up there and just throws some like
bonks it.
horrible pitch that just bounces like 10 feet from the
Goes
plate,
over the catcher's head.
Yeah. Or he nails somebody, in the dugout. Goes way off.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
yeah, that was cool.
Yeah,
awesome.
Well, thanks for sticking around with us, and we'll talk about sex at some point. We'll let you know so that we'll give you a little heads up, because I think it's gonna be a great conversation. There's so many, as we've been discussing it. There's so much. I just lose words, guys. There's so much perversion among what God designed sex to be, and I think we have a lot of men that listen to this, a lot of guys, and maybe one woman. I don't know. So we're gonna talk about how it affects men, and if stats are correct, 80 to 90% of men view porn at least once a month. So it's probably affecting all of us, and it's gonna be a good conversation. So we'll see you guys next time. Hope you have a great rest of your week.